to this week's episode of Renoites. My name is Conor McGuivey. I'm your host, as always. Good to have you here with me. This week on the podcast, I am speaking with Jolene Cook from Reno Local Food Week. Reno Local Food Week starts August 15th and is a week-long event full of local food events. There's farmers markets, there's classes, there's giveaways, there's all kinds of fun stuff going on, and Jolene is the one who has put it all together. She also works with Reno Food Systems, an urban farm here in town. We had a great conversation about local food, about our local food systems, but much more than that, we talked about community and how food relates to our local community, the way that we relate to each other, and how that factors into not just how we eat and how healthy we are and how healthy our environment is, but also how we connect to each other. It was a really, really great conversation. I hope that you enjoy it. This week's episode is brought to you by DJ Trivia. As you know, I am a host for DJ Trivia at several venues around town. I'd like to tell you a little bit about DJ Trivia Leagues. If you play at the same venue week after week, you're automatically participating in the DJ Trivia League, which is super fun. The top teams from each venue get to compete at the end of the season in a big kind of battle royale for the best of the best in Reno Trivia. Super fun. Go to djtrivianevada.com to check out locations, and I hope I'll see you out at one of my venues soon. This episode is brought to you by This Is Reno. This Is Reno is the local news source if you want to know what's going on in our town. Go to thisisreno.com. You can sign up for the daily newsletter, which has links to all of the articles, all the headlines. I recommend you subscribe to This Is Reno for the best local reporting on what's happening in town. And now, this week's guest, Jolene Cook. Jolene Cook, thank you so much for coming on Renoites. It's so exciting to have you on the show.
Dude, I'm so excited. I'm such a big fan of Reno. So anybody that is helping spread the Reno love, I want to be friends with that person. So thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, I read an article that you were interviewed in. It said something like you're one of the top 3 most Reno-obsessed people in the city or something like that, like planting that flag of like a dedicated Renoite. And you've moved away and then come back to Reno, right? So I guess a good place to start is we're talking about food on this episode and Reno's kind of local food scene and things that are happening in the food system in Reno. But you have not always lived here. You're born and raised here and then left and came back, kind of my same story too. So can you talk a little bit about your path from leaving Reno and then coming back, and also how food played into that, like your interest in food and what brought you back to Reno to be involved in food here?
For sure. No problem. Yeah. So I say I was born and bred. I don't know why I say that, but I try to be funny, I guess, in Reno. And I feel like it's kind of an iconic place. And so since I went away, I felt like that got reiterated, reinforced, and especially because my name's Jolene. My parents were at the Dolly Parton concert at the MGM Grand in Reno. And they're like, if we ever have a girl, we should name her Jolene. And, so it's kind of a cool story between Jolene and Reno and all that good stuff. So my point is I guess the love of Reno got planted early. But yeah, so I grew up here and kind of, classic, great childhood, which I'm really thankful for. But the one thing that I didn't have going for me is I was always tired. And it was definitely different than a lot of the other kids. And so my mom was always taking me to the doctor, et cetera. And I had a ton of sinus infections, and I won't go too much into detail in that, but, something was definitely different about me than the other kids. I remember sitting on the playground and being like, why does everybody want to run around when all I want to do is just sleep? And I remember feeling that really deeply in 5th grade. The reason I share that is because I started to be honest, I don't even remember how the connection happened. I don't know if something got said or whatever, but I remember starting to read labels. I used to like to read shampoo bottles and stuff as a kid and figure out what things were made out of. And maybe it was just my love of cooking. When I was a kid, I used to have friends over and we do these experiments without baking soda and burn brownies into pans that I'd hide in my backyard that my parents would find months later. So I've always loved food, I guess, right? And cooking it. And then I just remember kind of being curious about what makes up recipes and, how that chemistry works, et cetera. So yeah, I don't remember exactly how, but I got into label reading and I was like, what is hydrogenated fats? Why is soy in so many things, like the rice-a-roni that I'm eating, and what's high fructose corn syrup? Just literally kind of super innocently curious about what those words even meant. But I discovered, I didn't have Google or whatever, but that maybe the food was something that was actually causing my fatigue. And this was like when I was 12, right? So when I was 15, I did what any self-respecting person who cares about like saving the world does. And I became a vegetarian. And then I just started eating tons of like quesadillas with lettuce and ranch. And I got even sicker. And it wasn't until I went away to college that my boyfriend at the time, he had been raised literally like off the land. Like I think I shared this story with you when we first met, but the coolest story I have from college is I used to be a big backpacker and a big hiker. And we were on this 26-mile hike. And basically he threw a rock up into the tree and hit a sage grouse. And that's what we had for dinner. And I don't know if it was because I was in love or because that's a joke, but it's literally like I started eating the food that he would make, and his mom made him make meals every week. And he literally had like a 30 by 30 foot garden where a lot of his food came from. He was a hunter and ate deer and just super, super holistic, living off the land, like I said, and whole food diet. And that's how I started eating in college. And I just felt like way better. I started to like really make the connection like, oh, okay, food is definitely something that has like a huge effect on me. I ended up volunteering at our local co-op in Bozeman, Montana, where I went to school. I got into photography. I went to a photography residency program in Maine. And so I was, not living in Reno at this time. And I ended up meeting a British guy. We dated long distance. I moved to England. And I started to like not feel good again. And I was eating like a lot of fish and chips and like heavier foods. And I was working in the photography industry. I worked at a really cool youth culture photo archive. It was so all consuming, my fatigue and my just not feeling good, that I basically like packed it in. I ordered CSA boxes from like the local farm in North London. I remember getting raw milk. I remember just diving really deep into like what I could do to help myself. I was drinking oregano oil on an empty stomach every morning and just doing that whole process of like exploration. I went to a homeopath. And I did start to feel better. And I was like, I'm really passionate about this. I was working with my partner at the time, and that was a little bit tricky. My parents worked together, and I was like, I don't know if I want to go down this path. So I quit my job. I enrolled in Hawthorne University's nutrition education program, and like I haven't looked back. I started being like super, super healthy, really conscientious of what I ate, etc. Moved back to Reno and brought my partner back here. And his dad unfortunately had a heart attack, and so he had to go back to England for a few months. And I was stuck in Reno. We had literally just gotten married and drove across the country for our honeymoon. And I was like, okay, I got to find a part-time job. And the co-op was hiring, and so I started as like the front end coordinator. And at the time, Amber, the current GM, wanted to take a break, and so I had had some management experience in London. I worked at a wellness center, which I absolutely loved because I was around a bunch of healthy people. And so then I became the GM of the co-op for the year that she took a break for. And that's really when it catapulted me into like local food, basically, and getting to know my farmer and understanding where food comes from and like the food politics and just kind of everything under the sun that's food focused. I'm telling you all this in detail, I guess, because that's my story from being home, raised in Reno, moving away, and kind of going in and out of feeling super good and figuring out that food was definitely something that influenced my physical health, and then figuring out how I could kind of make a living out of my food obsession.
Mm-hmm. And then, so you worked at the co-op and you managed the co-op, which has this big focus on local food and the local food shed. And I think that people don't always know how local their food is. We have farmers markets, so that's a good way to know your farmer and to connect with farmer. And so you created Reno Food Week. And is the goal of that to educate people about what local food is? Is it about connecting people with the local food sources? Is it education? To start, what is Reno Food Week? How does it work? And then what's the primary goal of it? Or what do you hope people get out of it?
Yeah. So great question. So when I left the co-op, because I had 2 kids at this point and knew that I didn't want to work 9 to 5 or, throughout the week, and I wanted to kind of be at home with my kids. So I had this like amazing local food experience. I knew that was something that I wanted to continue to be relevant in. I became a board member of Reno Food Systems, which is an urban farm, 5 acres within the city limits. And that like further accentuated my love of people and food and community and things. But my husband, is pretty well traveled, and he went to Ontario and had known that there was a local food week. And he's like, hey, Jolene, I think that you can do this. I think that you have a good personality for like connecting people and making sure that there's promotion, like having a little bit of marketing experience. and you should do your own like Reno Local Food Week. And so I wrote a specialty crop grant to the Nevada Department of Agriculture. And that was it was actually 4 years ago, because I did a feasibility study to research to see if like Reno is ready for it. And it was like Reno is ripe, part of the food pun, but it was good timing. I got a lot of receptivity from the farmers whom I'd had like really healthy relationships with through working at the co-op, and like that I literally would see every week at the farmers market when I was buying their food that they were growing for me. And so it was just kind of a cool opportunity that just synced into like being able to be a stay-at-home mom, but still have something to work on that kind of kept me sane and let me leave the kids every once in a while, and then put on this week-long celebration. So to answer your question, what kind of came first was the local food week. But what's happened actually is through my partnership with Reno Food System, I also helped them put on Reno Garlic Fest. And that was a rad, super cool, like people are crazy for garlic and I'm crazy for food. So like I met my people, you know what I mean? And that was really rad. And it was a cool collaborative project that we did with Be the Change Project and Local Food Network. And the third year that we did it, which was the year before COVID in 2019, we had almost 5,000 people show up to Pat Baker Park, which is just off of Audi Boulevard. And it's not a huge park. And it was ram and jam. Like it was crazy. We had local music, we had beer, we had garlic, cotton candy. And that was cool. It was a little bit overwhelming, if I'm honest. But the cool thing about it actually was that they had a really clear mission statement. And so did the co-op, frankly. And so then when we were going into COVID, I knew that we couldn't do the fest like we had planned, right? Like we couldn't gather 5,000, thousands of people. Yeah. But I knew that they had this mission statement. And so the mission statement is, support local farms, cultivate community, and educate people. And so I was like, well, we did a really good job of supporting farmers. And so the first thing I was like, okay, I'm going to call every farmer and make sure that their garlic sales are okay. Because they would depend upon us, right? They would make literally $1,000 selling their entire garlic harvest in one day. Mm-hmm. And that's so great for a farmer to have that consistency and that community and just a really fun time. But I called them and they're like, dude, 80% of America's garlic grows in China. So we're good. Like people are having problems getting China. We are sold, like Prema Farms, for instance, said that they had been sold out. So it was an interesting supply chain question, but the farmers were good. Like they had been taken care of. So then I was like, well, cultivating community is a little bit tricky. Like, how are we going to do that in COVID? So I literally just Googled community network education, because I knew that education piece was something that we hadn't been really that like strong on for the previous years. And it was just a cool kind of like trusting the universe, the process experience, because there's a lot of bad things, right, throughout COVID. But one of the silver linings for me was this awareness that if you're able to be nimble and pivot and stay positive and stay connected to like the vision, then things can happen. Because I Googled this, community education platform, and this thing called Mighty Networks came up. And it's a social networking tool. It's a platform. There's an app, and it's like a website that basically thousands of people are creating communities under. And they have an event feature, they have groups, and they had courses all integrated into this platform for super cheap, like $90 a month if you have a course, but only $20 a month if you just have groups. So I had the grant funds. I knew that I could do a scope of work modification and be able to do this garlic growing course. And the cool thing about the Garlic Fest from the year before that I didn't mention is that it was on Facebook. We got into some weird like algorithm, like awesome algorithm, which, if there is such a thing, and we had 15,000 likes. Whoa. And so that's what we didn't have to spend $1 on marketing. And it was super multicultural. Loads of people came from literally the neighborhood. Like they walked down there. And so it was just this rad, like really solid group of like positive people that had this experience. And so I knew that I had these like 15,000 people that were disappointed that the event couldn't, had to be like completely rescheduled or postponed or just didn't happen. Right. I like posted literally, like I put like 3 posts on Facebook because I'm not super good at social media. And I was like, hey, we're going to do a garlic growing course. Like who wants to join us? Like we're going to call it a year in garlic. I'm going to get a garlic farmer or a garlic grower who's super passionate about this to like take us through the process. And all we'll have to do is like do a monthly content where we like put together, hey, this is what you have to do for garlic. And people can plug in, they can be part of this bigger process. We ended up getting like 250 people to join the course. And we worked with Katie Chandler from Be the Change. She loves garlic. Like loves it. It's like her soul food. And so that was super rad. And she was really, really good and really well received behind the camera. And she knows a lot, but she's also kind of humble. And then we gave away free garlic to the participants who were part of the course. The cool thing is it was like this awesome success story. And I was like, wait a minute, I think that this community that I'm trying to foster, that I like was a part of the Reno Garlic Fest, is larger than garlic. What if this platform, this tech tool that's super COVID friendly, right, is an avenue and a way to connect the larger food community who I know, but maybe not everybody knows. And I kind of could see that people like get stuck a little bit in their silos and they get focused on their projects and then they get really busy. And then it's hard to like support each other, even though that's what we kind of all want. And it's hard to kind of ask for help. Farmers a little bit, I say one of the things that's bad about them, they're a little prideful, you know? So I just was like, and I have this like local food week, which I called Growing Envy, you know, which I had done 2 years prior. I'm like, what if I called this literally like community food network, Growing Envy? We do a local food week, and that's like how we celebrate the efforts that we do all year. You perfectly are capturing what Growing Envy is. It's an opportunity for education because there's so much opportunity for like resource sharing and just learning from each other. Two, for what you already said too, which is connection. I've just got finished reading this book called Community Cure, and it's this rad story about how people have incredibly more positive health outcomes if they do it in a group. And so that with me and my personal story about becoming healthier through eating and how hard it was, like it literally took me 20 years to just do it on my own. Like I just felt like, man, I have an opportunity to lead by example and to cultivate this community of people who can have better health just by plugging into a community that cares, right? Like, and it's a community about food. It's a community about learning how to grow your food, learning how to cook your food, and learning how to share food. So yeah, so it's about education, it's about connection to community, and it's about celebration. What's life if you didn't have joy, right? And that's kind of the opportunity, like where Local Food Week so beautifully slots in, is it's an opportunity to celebrate. I just feel like those three things are kind of lacking in our culture, right? Like we're super perfectionistic. The antidote to perfectionism is gratitude and appreciation. So instead of like needing to be the perfect farmer or needing to be the perfect person or whatever, what we kind of, an antidote to that perfectionism is just focusing on what we have, appreciating what we have, being grateful for what we have. And so that's how I feel I can like offer that. And I'm like a very positive person, like annoyingly positive, like ask anybody that knows me, well, maybe besides my husband. But yeah, like it's a talent of mine. I don't know if you've heard of the book Strengths, like Now Find Your Strengths, but I did all this like leadership training and reading when I was the GM. And I did this like strengths finding work because it's really helpful in management to support people through what they're naturally good at, because then they have the opportunity to do what they're good at, what like naturally comes to them. And so if you can focus on that and mitigate the things that they suck at, you know, it's way better. So I learned about myself that I'm just super positive. So it's very easy for me to think positive thoughts and to like say positive things.
Yeah, I think one of the challenges that I see around getting people involved in stuff like eating more healthy and participating in local food economy, stuff like that, is just getting people to care. Like everyone is very busy. Everyone has so many different things going on in their lives. And then when there are things that we know we should care more about, like I know and everyone knows I should eat better. I should eat more local food. There's all of these shoulds. But then how do you reach those people and make it easy for them? And I think something like a local food week that has the sense of, like you mentioned, like celebrating and enjoying and acknowledging all of the work that goes in year round and putting it into an event format that's a certain period of time. And that way people who maybe aren't actively participating normally, that's an entry point. That's a way for people who are disengaged to actually start participating. And we talked a lot about the community aspect. And I think that is a huge part of it, is there's this challenge of the individualistic approach to eating healthier or supporting local food, things like that. And it feels like there's so many ways to do it wrong. Like you can go, oh, I'm going to eat healthier, so I'm going to buy the organic thing at the grocery store. And then you read an article that says, oh, well, this is a giant mega corporation just branding something organic and you're not doing anything, you bum. And it's really intimidating. But when there's this community element where you are actually connecting with people in your own town who are telling you about local food right in the area, that makes it so much easier rather than trying to figure everything out on our own when there's so much conflicting information. Is that a big part of the purpose of community, is to make an easier inroad for people rather than putting it on them themselves to say, okay, well, it's hard for you to fix everything yourself as an individual, but what can we do together as like a small group of people? Is that the purpose of the community approach?
Yes, like 100%. So what a community, like a question that you could ask a community is, what do we want to achieve together? And so what I'd like to achieve, and what I think the people who are joining Growing Envy want to achieve, is a more resilient local food system. I don't want to go too much into the weeds, but if we think about food as a system, that's a start. It isn't just like go to the grocery store, right? Like somebody produced that food, somebody picked the food, you know, somebody drove the food, somebody delivered the food. A lot of times somebody else cooked the food. And then like waste management, right? Like it's a whole crazy system. And in one way that can seem overwhelming, but in another way, it can be like, wow, like this is super intricate and super like not about me. To answer your kind of question about feeling overwhelmed or just the individual, and maybe you get like the shoulds, like you should eat better. What I kind of like to tell people is like, go with what you love, like what do you like about food? Do you like restaurants? Do you like whatever? And then plug into that, because it's not about like trying to make somebody feel bad for what they're not, right? Community is all about finding what you're good at and allowing opportunity for you to plug in with that beautiful thing that you have that the community needs. I think that it's just like such a different mind shift. I've been doing a lot of work about the patriarchy and reading a bunch of books about community because I am doing this work. And I don't want to trigger anybody. Like I talked to a male friend of mine at the farmer's market last week, and he's like, I find the word patriarchy triggering. And it was cool that he had the language to say that, and I appreciated that. So I'm very cognizant of not wanting to alienate anybody, because that's actually the opposite of what I want to do. I want everybody to feel like super safe and super like in a place where they can feel like they can speak their mind and they'll be heard and respected. But we can be real with each other. It doesn't have to be like light and fluffy, but that we're in like a place where we can like grow together and be receptive and open, etc. So, but I have been doing this patriarchy work, and I can't help but mention that like this is where a lot of my framework is coming from, because I am so passionate about community. It is an antidote to the individualism that patriarchy is so prominent in our culture. And there's nothing wrong with patriarchy, right? It's like a dualistic thing, It's just that I feel like, and I think, we could argue that our society and our culture has swung too far in that direction. I think the unhealth of our population is a sign of that. I think the stress, I think mental health, I think, like I was mentioning, the perfectionism. And I think maybe at the root of it is the connection piece. We're disconnected from our food. We're disconnected from other people, from relationship. And not to be too dire, it's just like a framework that helps me kind of be able to operate and understand why I'm so passionate about this work. And so, so community is that antidotal piece to the individual. And so that's the number one thing that I want to like celebrate and foster within that community. It's like you show up and you have to be accountable, so you want to be healthier, right? And I don't want people to feel judged. Like I think there's a lot of elitism in local food, and I don't know how it is in other cities or whatever, but it feels like that way here. Like people need a friend to go to the co-op, to like feel comfortable. And it's nothing like bad about the co-op. It's just that I've literally heard those things, and that in and of itself makes me feel like sad, and that maybe we as a community, as a local food thing, is making people feel like they're not good enough, like they're not doing it good enough. And therein lies like what I think is like the cultural perception, like that you can do something perfect or that you can do something right. And I think when you're in community, it's a process, right? Like it's been a journey. You're never there. It's never right or wrong. It's like learning, and when you can do that in a vulnerable space and a place where you feel like you can be transparent, it cultivates a vibe or something that allows for people to feel like they can really plug in and offer something, like I said, to the community that it needs.
There's this focus, and I know this is also built into the way our economic systems work, on efficiency, on what is the fastest, most efficient, most productive way to do things. And I don't know if it's true or not, but you get this sense that local food and urban gardens and these kind of things are at odds with the concept of efficiency and productivity, which we're raised our entire lives to think is the only and the best way to do things in like a capitalist society. Is how do you produce? How do you make things more efficient? There's no focus on worrying about waste and the external costs of these things. And that's one of the huge problems is you grow, everything's focused on efficiency and pushing your trash and waste and external costs onto other people or other countries or onto the planet. And then you talk about local food and local food production, and whether it's true or not, that goes against everything that we're taught about how scalable are these things? How can we actually produce enough to feed people? Is that totally wrong? Like, is there a local food system? Does that work? Is that something that doesn't need to be at odds with actual productivity and efficiency and meeting the needs of people who have to eat?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I think that's a fascinating and kind of brave thing to think. When we make things have certain key objectives and things that need to be measured, like money. And I mean, obviously, it's hard to operate, right? Like we don't even know how to do that. So I'm in this like odds with like trying to figure out how we do this. Like I don't have the answer, right? I have no answers. I'm just like vulnerable and brave enough to be like, hey, I'm showing up. This is what I want. Who wants to join me? So, but I think that it again is the mindset and the paradigm awareness of, well, when you're always measuring things to numbers and to growth and to GDP, and to finances, like we struggle with the same thing at Reno Food System. It's like every year we're like trying to make more money and grow bigger, but every year we're like, and I'm not even the farmer. It feels hard, you know what I mean? Because those are the things that we are trying to achieve, as opposed to if we change this conversation to something like, what are our values? Are we achieving what those things? Are we showing up with integrity? Are we stewards of the land? Are we taking time to, to like drink water? You know what I mean? Like, and be more efficient in that way. And I think that's actually, that kind of dovetails a little bit to what you were speaking of with local food, is that it can be perceived as more expensive too, because it isn't as efficient as industrial ag. And then frankly, there's not the commodity, what's it, crutch or whatever that a lot of the other cheaper, more processed fast food, et cetera, have from.
Right. Yeah. They're all built on like subsidized corn that goes into corn syrup, that goes into everything and that kind of thing. And I didn't mean to frame it as that the efficiency is the goal, or that enhanced productivity is the right answer. But I think that for a lot of people that have lived their entire lives thinking that is the goal and that's the most important thing, that breaking out of that mindset to maybe being ultimately efficient is not the goal at the end of the day, if the cost of that is poor quality food and bad health and destruction to the environment. So the thing that I always kind of wonder about is what can we take from the, maybe not like the large scale industrial farming, but we've, had so much advancement in technology and learned so much about how to produce food that has been maybe misutilized to create these global food systems that have a lot of damaging effects. Mm-hmm. Have we learned things from these systems that can be applied at the local level to kind of, I don't want to say meet somewhere in the middle, but basically take the tools from the, systems with a lot of problems and apply those tools in a local way to maybe have, better crop yields or whatever, but locally, and see those benefits realized at the local level with less of the, outside damaging effects of the huge scale of, big ag as it is right now.
Yeah. And I think that's a fascinating question. And I don't exactly have the answer to it. I do think that, like the unchecked patriarchy, I do think we've swung in too far of the direction of dependency on industrial ag and on large scale farming productions, and to the deficit and decimation of local farms. So there's so much work to be done to even right that percentage and to get back to producing more locally, that I feel like maybe the lesson is that it's not necessarily super specific in terms of like the tech tools or whatever like that, but it's just the awareness that the way that we're doing it is not serving the overall health of the outputs of the system. And we didn't know that until we pushed it. Like, I think that I'm not super pessimistic. I don't want to believe, right, whether it's right or wrong, that we like purposely do stuff to the detriment of our being and our planet, et cetera, right? It's just a different way of thinking about it. And it's like an earnest, like, hey, I want to figure this out. If this can feed more people, let's do, you know what I mean? But then when you do something and you continually do it and it continually, like, there's outputs that are negative, that's when I feel like we need to like wake up and be like, hey, we're getting a lot of concrete information saying that this maybe isn't the way to do it. And that's kind of where I see where we have an opportunity to do the opposite, which is why I am so passionate about local food systems, because it was such a part of my healing journey that's where I ate like heavy industrial ag food. I remember going to Burger King every week and being like, am I going to have the French chicken sandwich or am I going to have the Texas barbecue chicken sandwich? Maybe next week I will have the Italian. Like, my fast food roots like run deep, and it's literally taken until like last year for me to like rid myself of those cravings and things, literally, because I think that like cellular memory or something still in my body. I've just personally been so inspired, and my life has been so positively impacted from having the opportunity to educate myself and having the finances and the privileges to be able to afford time to go to the farmer's market, to be able to spend my money on local dollars. Because I make a conscious effort, to spend my money locally, but I go to Costco too, you know what I mean? And I know the difference, and it's hard sometimes, I would like to mention that I have my parents, they're older and stuff, but make meals for them. I make them every single dinner, and they pay me a little bit of money. And so I'm afforded the time, and it suits me. I love it. I'm super passionate about it. I still to this day, like, read every single label. I still to this day, like, try to figure out the price point. I have a humongous spreadsheet where I enter every single thing, and I'm super informed about how much things cost, etc. And so I'm very aware of that, but I also see it as an intense passion and an ability where I have the opportunity to spend a ton of my time learning this information, and then being able to, I have the opportunity to use my money in this way, because I have a house, and because I'm white middle class or whatever that is, right? So I'm very aware of my place in the system, and I see myself as not even necessarily a leader, but somebody that has done a lot of work and that, like, is inspired but still curious and wants to share and wants to educate. So I guess my question to you is, it's like, since I don't work in industrial ag, and since I don't know a lot about those things, and I know more about, like, my personal story, and I know more about my local food system. And so I don't feel like I have a good answer as to, like, what we can take from those industrial ag systems, and I have it more like of a personal offering of what I've experienced by being able to plug into this community, And I would like to mention that I do like coffee, and I have 2 small girls. A day doesn't go by where I don't have bananas. And so I don't want to, like, bastardize those things or make them seem like they're wrong, because people are living on those trees, and that's how their families subsist. Is there's a way for me to do, like, fair trade and to make sure that those are organically grown and whatever. Those are my values, and that's what I believe in, and I want to foster and support those things. But it's not like I eat 100% local. I don't even know the percentage, frankly, but it's not possible. And so I just see it as an opportunity to, like you said, maybe take the good and figure out how to, like, accentuate the both. I do want to kind of plug or, like, just mention that I've been kind of developing a closer relationship with Kelly. She's the executive director at the Fallon Food Hub. We had this really fascinating conversation because I'm doing this event for Local Food Week called Multiplier Effect Monday. And it's all about how, like, your local dollars really positively impact your community for, the environmental benefits, economic benefits, and health benefits. And this is specific to local food, I guess I should say, but the multiplier effect is beyond just food. Like, it's basically, if you just support local people, then 1.7 times the amount of money that you spend goes back into local economies, whereas it's like a third, maybe even a fifth. I'm sorry, I don't have that number to my mind. It's just a cool concept, and it's a thing for me to stay inspired to support my local person when it is more expensive, when it is more inconvenient, etc. But she threw these numbers down, and I just feel like it's so fascinating. I can't shake it, so I want to share it because I feel like it's topical. So basically, she has about 200 people who spend $40 a week on a CSA box. Those 200 people, right? You times that by 40, that's $8,000. From those 200 people, she's literally financially supporting 4 or 5 farmers. So those 4 or 5 farmers are each making $1,500 to $2,000 a week, which sounds like a lot, right? But, like, it's only seasonal, and it's, you still have all the time
right,
producing the seed, right? Like, fostering the plants, watering the plants, so it's not all gross profit, if you will. But I did the math, and I was like, okay, so very simplistically, if you divide those 200 people by 5, that's 40 people. So 40 people support 1 farm. Like, our actions hella matter. You know what I mean? Like, that is so beautiful. And that's 40 people spending $40, which that's not nothing. That's kind of a lot of money. Some people can't afford to spend that on fruits and veg, let alone, locally grown or whatever, organic, etc. But then it kind of got me thinking, like, every dollar that we can spend locally matters, so say, like, the 40 people, it's $40. Just to do the math, what if 80 people were spending $20? What if 160 were spending 10? What if 320 spent $5 and just bought a bunch of carrots? Like, if 300 people buy 1 bunch of locally grown carrots a week for the season, that you are supporting a farmer. I don't know if that, like, gives anybody else the goosebumps, but for me, it's just it's so helpful to have those numbers to make me feel like what I do matters, And my point is also, you don't have to buy kale, collards, kohlrabi, you don't have to buy, like, everything local. Like, if you go to your farmer's market more than once a season, you're doing better than the average person. And not that it's a competition, but it's like it's a point of inspiration. Like, go twice, bring a friend. You are literally helping foster somebody. And, like, farmers are the coolest people. Like, they're, like, the biggest badasses, It's so hard to grow food, and we just get it so easily. It's easy to not appreciate it. But when you meet farmers, when you see their hands, when you know that they've been working, like, 27 days in a row or whatever, I can't help but be inspired to drop $5 on those carrots that are so beautiful, so delicious, so fresh, and just such a part, like a smaller seed, right? Of such a larger, beautiful tree.
Yeah, no, I think that this idea of perfectionism, that you have to do it all or nothing, or you have to do everything right, or why bother, that's something that affects me a lot personally. It's something that I definitely struggle with, because there is this notion that, if you're not vegan, then you're contributing to the global warming, and like everything has to be, or it doesn't have to be, you get this idea that it's all giant lifestyle changes. If you want to be better, you have to completely upend the way that you do things. And that's not actually the reality. There are these small actions that, like you just described, make a financial difference in the community for these farms, for these farmers. Is the activities that are part of Reno Food Week, are those intended to give people small ways to have that impact? Is that the idea, that someone who might not be vegan, might not be buying all, local organic produce, might not be even that aware of local food stuff, but they have these little inroads that are, simple actions they can take that are actually helping these farmers? And is Reno Food Week intended to give those local farms and organizations a way to reach people? Is that a big part of what the Food Week is about? Is like, how do you get to people? Because we're all busy, we're all living our lives. Everyone is very, I think, set in routines, and like the way that we live and the way that we eat are so habitual and so ingrained in the way that we live. Is part of Reno Food Week just an attempt to break through that, to be like, hey, wake up and like come do a food thing that's different, that you're not used to, just to kind of spark that open-mindedness to other ways of eating?
Yeah, I kind of think I see it as like, I'm super conscientious of like the systems of things, right? Because I feel like if you get to the root cause, or if you get to like one wrench within that system and you make a positive impact, then it has positive beneficial knock-on effects, right? So when I planned the local food week, for one, I had a rad group of women, all volunteers. We called ourselves the Local Food Lovers Committee. We'd meet every single week and we got together and brainstormed. We did like the sticky brain dump where it's like no idea is too big. They helped me every single week come together and foster my confidence and help with just like posting events on Go Green locally, just, whatever. So the point is I kind of tried to make it a group effort to begin with. And then I tried to think about it as a system, like, okay, how can we promote our growers? How do we promote the restaurateurs? How do we promote, how do you cook? Right. And then I also tried to, because of COVID, frankly, I learned that not everything has to be in person. And that when we did do stuff online, maybe 10 people would show up live. And so that was a little disappointing when I had like the Facebook whatever, I'd have like, 100 people say they were going. It doesn't matter, because then after the fact, people would watch it in the comfort of their own home. And I got like, 600 views on the Urban Roots, how to make sprouts in a jar, and talk about a way to like financially and healthfully benefit yourself. It's like, learn how to sprout. Like, it's super affordable once you get into the system and into the routine, incredibly nutrient dense, incredibly environmentally friendly. With all of those things in mind, I'm always thinking about, one, the system, and then two, meeting people with where they're at. I mean, I was kind of like, that's kind of a lame saying. I don't know if it's overused, but it's the intention that I come from is like, I'm not judging anybody. To be honest, I don't even really like going to events. So like, I'm very cognizant of like needing someone else to do something to add to their already like super time crunched thing, So my point is I try to like create different types of events, different workshops that are all within those systems and that are all different ways to plug in. I'm giving away a bunch of free food. There's a bunch of demos, and we're doing like this participatory pledge where folks can literally just go to a Google form and be like, hey, I really want to divest some of my food dollars into the local food economy. And I have like a page on the website that shares with everybody different ways to do that, whether it's donating to a small local nonprofit, whether it's volunteering your time, whether it's educating yourself and going to an online workshop about how to make stock. I kind of pride myself on my challenge to myself to provide like a really wide umbrella to cast that net as far and wide as possible, so as many people feel like it's accessible, like it's totally doable, like it's fun,
Mhm.
and that maybe something speaks to them. I don't need everybody to care about food as much as me.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, I feel like I am like so excited that I found my thing and I want to inspire people, but not everybody is as much into food as I am. But if I can spark a little bit of curiosity or a little bit of interest, or just like somebody feeling super good because they ate really healthy that day, that is what it's all about for me. So yeah, absolutely, the local food week, I hope. And if it's not, then like give me feedback, tell me other ways to be doing it, because I mean, it's only in its third iteration, and last year was COVID. So we kind of had to like flip the script and do a bunch of stuff, mostly virtual in quotes. So so I'm like open ears, and I love learning, and I love figuring out how to do things better. And I love community. So come on down to my little local food community committee. Tell me what's up. Tell me how else I could be doing it better,
Yeah, no, that's great. I think that this idea of being able to grow and change and improve things as they go, especially Reno Food Week, you said it's only in its third year, plenty of opportunity to adapt and make it better and better and include more people and more ways of participating year after year. To talk about Reno specifically, so you moved back here and you've been involved in the local food scene. Reno's a pretty big city, like the Reno metro area is 400 and something thousand people. What is it like here? I know that it's high desert, so there's things that grow and things that
Yeah.
don't grow. What might people not understand about the Reno Food Shed? Do you find that a community this size and with this particular kind of ecological environment create a good opportunity for a local food system? What have you seen in recent years? Are we getting better? How are these local farms performing? What's your general read on Reno as a good potential for local food systems that work? How's it going? And what do you see as
Yeah.
opportunities? Kind of what's the big picture on Reno as a food city?
Thanks for asking. I love that. I want to go back to the Fallon Food Hub thing. So 200 people is 1% of Fallon's population. So that's like a very small number of people who are doing it. And it, like, my point is that there's such a huge opportunity to grow that number. I mean, even just double it, right? And then Kelly's feeling super crazy stressed. But so my point is like the potential is huge here. I think, to talk about the gripes just really quickly, because I don't like vibe on that, but there's two things. I think our soil's not super good. I mean, it's great for producing cantaloupes, right? It's super alkaline, like think Black Rock Desert here, So there can be that trouble. And then two, water. It's like I think we're the driest state in the union, right? And who knows what's going to happen in the future, but there's a lot of information saying that it might get worse. And so I think that those are two things that are like very real challenges that we all want to be like aware of and just communicate ahead of time to be like, okay, these are issues. How are we going to work around that? How are we going to mitigate that, et cetera? The other part of it, where what I like, the pulse check of the community, because I'm pretty plugged in. I think the thing that this is going to come as no surprise, but that I'm super excited about is that I feel like part of a community. Like, I go to this Riverside Farmers Market on Thursday and I will literally run into like almost all of my friends, and we'll have a bit of a natter. It's a British term for a chat. We'll have some strawberries, that are grown from a farm like 60 miles away. And to me, it's a good time, right? But so the point is that I definitely see like a fostering of relationship. And it's like that quote, what's going to change the world? It's a small group of committed people. And I like really, really am like the living flesh of knowing that exists in Reno. And that excites me tremendously. So there's that. And then I do think that we need more farmers. I don't even know the numbers about what percentage of people like the local food economy here, and I think that there's probably resources. I kind of did some loose math in my mind, but it might be like 50 grand a week, and it's less than 3 to 5% of like our overall food dollars. So my point is that there's huge room for growth. And if you do those numbers from the Fallon Food Hub, I mean, we literally could be supporting like hundreds of farms if we had access to land. That's another issue, I guess I should have said. It's getting crazy expensive, but there's nimble ways to do that too. So Reno Food Systems, we lease it from the county, and that's been a really beautiful, positive relationship because it's like civic engagement, right? And that's that's a 20-acre parcel of land, and 5 acres is a lot of land. Like, you can produce a lot of food on that. And another experience I've had with Reno Food Systems is every week, it kind of has tailed off recently, but 2 to 3 people were getting in touch each week wanting to participate in their local food system, whether it be volunteership or some offering like free ducks or like needing a job or wanting to become a farmer. So to me, I see people who are wanting to plug in. I know Desert Farming Initiative is interested in like creating a certification within the university. I know they had a ton of interest on one of the programs that she's doing. So I think that there's people who are interested. I think figuring out how to do it financially is obviously a super important piece. I think there's opportunity within the community to cultivate relationships so that they have support and they can figure out, okay, which restaurants are consistent, what bartenders. Michael Moberly's doing his part to like help us out with that. He's a rad Renoite, and I listened to your podcast on him, and he's such a sweetie. I do feel like there is a lot of possibility, and that's the thing that I like to focus on and talk about. And I don't know how much like problem solving and like what are the, you know what I mean? Like that to me, I don't think is the focus on what we need to do in the local food community. I think that we have an opportunity to gather and to figure out like what we want to do and what is possible and to go after it. And that's kind of why I'm cultivating this growing MV platform, is because I feel like the more people who have their eyes on the prize and the more energy, the better. I mean, my sister's the farmers market manager of the Sparks Farmers Market, and there's been 2 new farms that have joined this year. And that's rad. So like Latin Farms, basically, they pulled out because they're kind of slowly easing into retirement. And he's one of the larger medium-sized farms. But then you have First Fruits, which is a regenerative farm just down the street. And he's coming on board, and he's been doing, I mean, he does a crazy amount of markets each week. And there's 2 more homesteading farms and 2 more urban farms that have joined. So it's not like overwhelming the amount of food production that we have. I want to honor and I celebrate what we do have, right? You know what I mean? So I want to be sure that that's heard, but I also think that there's a lot of room for growth. I think the cost piece, the inconvenience piece, and the fact that restaurants are not in like a great space to be able to be, super nimble about what farmers have. I mean, Mark Estes like the champion of all those things, but he's kind of a special breed. And I wish there were more of him, frankly. That's kind of, I think, something that can be fostered. I don't know how many restaurants have the time and capacity and interest in plugging into the local food scene. So that's some place where I feel like there can be more community built.
Yeah, that is something that I wanted to ask you about, is the restaurant's role in introducing people to local food. Because I know that Reno has experienced kind of this renaissance in our restaurant industry in recent years, and there's much more, I think, local food, or maybe not local food, but just more interesting food and local restaurants that are changing the way that people eat in Reno. Like you mentioned, Mark Estes, I think, was kind of the real driver of this over the last 10 years or so with his restaurants. And I think we talked about this the other day, where there needs to be people who are willing to put the money in and open restaurants and bring these things to people and put it right in front of people. So you need some big moves here and there from the consumer side rather than just the producer side. Is eating local at restaurants and finding restaurants that have local food, is that a big part of introducing people to local food or making it more accessible? Are local restaurants doing their part on this? Could they be doing better? What is Reno's like local food connection to Reno's restaurant scene look like? And is there good opportunity there for more connection? Are they involved in like the local food week?
Yeah. So the way that I promote the restaurants through Local Food Week is I basically buy gift cards from them, and then we do like social media shares. So if you participate in the pledge, then you get entered to win into like this, like, from the Cheese Board or from the Co-op or from Liberty or from Tolly. So, I mean, there is, from what I understand, and I want to just be like clear that I am not like the end all be all of all things local food and restaurants. You know what I mean? So I don't know. So I almost want to give the local restaurants the opportunity to present their way of thinking, like, what like kind of their challenges are and stuff. But in my very humble opinion, I don't think that it is as robust as it could be. And I think that what Mark Estes has done, he's made it like a brand, and it's his belief system. And so it's super integral to what he does, and it's just how he is. And so that's that, and that's rad. And not everyone's like that, and that's totally okay. But I think that there's a lot of barriers to entry. It's like the farmers that we have aren't able to provide consistency. We are a very seasonal place. We're not like California. We're not like Sacramento, where like you can get a ton of stuff for 10 months. It's very seasonally dependent. Sometimes consistency is off with farmers. There's a huge education component about like, sometimes chefs are super picky, and, and then the farmers don't have it. And then they don't get the consistency that they can get from Bonanza or US Foods. Right. You know what I mean? So I think there are a lot of barriers basically that make it super tricky for restaurants to do it. The one thing I would say that is a little bit of a gripe is that I do think that there's like greenwashing, which is a term in the local food scene where people say that they do more than they actually do. I wouldn't like ever make somebody feel bad or whatever, right? Like that's not my jam, but I do think that like it's a fine line between being honest about what you're doing and then what you're promoting. And I think local is super attractive and has a hot vibe right now. But
for sure. I think it's become kind of as much a marketing term as an actual descriptor of the food, right?
That I do think that like maybe the people who are marketing savvy enough to know that they can use the word and that it sounds good, and that like the average consumer isn't going to dig deep and not like check what they're using and, oh, where's the spinach come from? And maybe people don't even really care about that. You know what I mean? So it is like a weird thing. And I don't think that Reno has it figured out yet. And for like the host of reasons why I've just said, but again, in my mind, like the positivity part is like, that's where we have room to grow. And I do think that there's a lot of creativity and there's a lot of guts in Reno and bravery. And I think that it just takes people creating and fostering the systems like Fallon Food Hub. I mean, they are doing these CSA boxes, and Tahoe Food Hub does a lot of wholesale accounts, and they're super rad and they're growing really fast and doing their thing, So it's fostering the community and figuring out what their strengths are and what they're good at, and then figuring out how they can, how you can help them succeed. So that's, I guess, a nod to the local food week is we're doing this little video about the multiplier effect, and it's going to be, in promotion of the Fallon Food Hub and the Tahoe Food. I'm realizing how important these things are and how important they are for the livelihood of farmers and how important they are for the local economy and the local environment and all the good things that local food does. And so that's a way that I can promote them. And I know Tahoe Food Hub does a lot of stuff with restaurants. So it's like leaving people to do their thing and what they're good at, and then just promoting the good work that they do. But I think that it's about figuring out what you're passionate about and how to find the other people or what you're curious about. Like, I mean, like, frankly, you've arrived at me just through your curiosity. You know what I mean? Like that in of itself shows personal development and shows your, what you're good at is allowing you to learn about all this thing. Mm-hmm. And you can go to the Riverside Farmers Market super easily. Like just start doing that, frankly. Like if there's one bit of advice I have for anybody who feels daunted over like the eating healthier or the local food scene, it's like literally just show up at your farmer's market and try to spend like $20. Like that's the best thing that you can do. Super easy. And you can't help but like feel good because I don't know, it's like National Farmers Market Week. And so I helped my sister at her market yesterday. And it was like really beautiful. It's senior market. There's loads of older people and they're so sweet. They're like, oh, we love this market. We're here every week. I don't know. My heart just grew. It was just like a beautiful experience. Humans like to be around other well-meaning humans and stuff. So that's what the farmers market offers, is it just offers an opportunity for that reconnection to the food. And that again is what I think is like what we're severely lacking. And we frankly are so disconnected that we don't even know how disconnected we are.
Right.
So if there's any ability for like connection, that's the magic.
I like that this focus is all about community for you, because I do think that is really the answer to this thing. And you said the one thing you can do is go to the farmer's market. And part of the appeal for me of going to the farmer's market is that it does, in addition to having all of this local food and feeling like you're supporting the local food economy, it is a gathering of people from your neighborhood or from your community. I love to see that. And that, I think, makes everything feel much more accessible and much more real. I think for people who have not been involved in eating a lot of local food, or who don't care, because a lot of people just don't care. They go to the grocery store and they buy what's at the grocery store and they don't think about it very much. But to go and see kind of this parallel of people in the community who are buying this local food and meeting these farmers where they're at and having these direct connections, I think that this is bigger than just food. I think that we're missing a sense of community.
Yes.
We're talking about it in a food context, but I think generally in almost everything that we do, we have been driven apart from each other. Social media is not actually connection with people. We're entirely online. And like COVID is another example of this, of we spent an entire year connecting electronically. And I do appreciate like the Zoom and the video chat thing as a better form of connection than just texting each other all the time, things like that. But generally, I think that we're a kind of disconnected society, and the community aspect of something specifically like a farmer's market gives this sense of, oh, there is a real community in person where we're engaging. And it's commercial. You're shopping, you're spending money. And I think that a lot of people have this idea of community as completely separate from markets and the economy and capitalism and exchange and all of that kind of stuff, when those things can go together. Like, we do have to shop, we do have to spend money. So we can do that in a smaller, more community-minded and focused way. You don't have to join a hippie commune to find a sense of community, right? You can do that at a place where you're shopping, where you're spending money, where you're buying your food. So I think that that community aspect is really a key that we're missing, and having that tied in with your food, with the things that you eat, the things that are nourishing your body, seems like a really natural connection to strengthen both of those things, both the way that we eat and the economic support for our food producers, and our kind of missing sense of being with people in community.
You've got it, Connor.
I figured it out.
Exactly encapsulated and distilled and felt the things that I'd like to, translate into this podcast. But yes, 100%. Like, I care. I mean, not to prioritize it, or it's not hierarchical by any sense of the imagination, but I care about community first and foremost. And I think that's because I also care about myself, and because I want myself to be healthy. And I know that, like, I'm a mom, dude, moms, it's so hard. And you realize the deficiency in community when you're a mom, and especially during COVID, that was crazy. That actually has been another like fire in my butt to help me realize the importance of this thing. Because when I go and hang out with a friend and she has 2 kids and my 2 kids are hanging out with her 2 kids, and we get to talk about like what, I don't know, I hang out with a lot of people who like food. So it's like, what'd you have for breakfast or whatever? Like, literally, those are our fun conversations. The sense of well-being and peace that I have is so amazing. And that's community. That relationship, that ability to like have your kids have the interactions with other kids, right? Because kids need to be with kids. They play and they do the same thing over and over and over again. That's tiring for an adult mind, like literally physiologically, like it's harder on an adult mind to do the same thing over and over again. Once I became a mom, I was just like, this isn't right. This does not feel good. I am angry. You know what I mean? And I don't want to be angry mommy. I want to be rad mom, like I have so much potential to be like a great mom, and I realized that it was because I wasn't living in community. And like you said, even though I probably could go and live in a hippie commune, I don't think my husband probably wouldn't be down for that. So I got to kind of operate within the means, but it's a yin yang thing. It's just the fact that I feel like we're so far in the other direction of community that's like the number one thing that we need to foster. And that when you show up with other people and you're vulnerable and you're just transparent about what you ate, what you didn't eat, or how you accidentally yelled at your kids and you feel bad, you feel better. And it's literally just human nature, and it's basics and it's foundational. Yeah. And so that's why I'm kind of fired up about this growing envy thing, is because I feel like I'm providing something that we as a society, we as Reno need.
Yeah. Tell me more about the Growing Envy platform. So there's this mighty network, and I talk a lot about social media, and I have all my general oppositions to the way that it works, but it sounds like this is very different than the large scale social media model, because it's not algorithmic in order to capitalize on your attention and insert ads and those kind of things. Is it all about not just farming, but like food in general, right? So it's not just for Reno Food Week. It's
no, not at all. It's actually not even for food. It's just for community building.
Oh, okay.
It's a social media platform, but there's no ads or algorithms. And I think that's super important, because I just watched The Social Network, and that that scared me, you know what I mean? Because it kind of exactly pinpointed what I intuitively felt, that like, I don't feel good after I leave social media, and there's a lot of benefits, like you said, the connection and having everybody at one place, etc. What I'm hoping is that this mighty network, this Growing Envy on this mighty network platform, can be something really authentic and can be an opportunity for people to connect, to get educated, and to celebrate. And I feel like hopefully people leave energized, not depleted. They're not comparing themselves, because they're in an environment where it's not like that. It's not who's winning. It's not a competition. It's not like, look at me. It's like, what are we trying to achieve together? And I think that together piece is like literally the missing point in social media, because social media is so egoic and so focused on the individual. That's the piece. Like, that's kind of goes back to that patriarchal concept of like, that's the missing crux of it, is that there isn't the opportunity. And I say this because there's opportunity to plug in and help people and support and all that other stuff, But I think that this Growing Envy that I'm trying to create, it's a tool. I'm working with DFI. We got a grant together where we're going to build a farm network on it and create like a farm network group. So it's going to be resource and information for farmers. But one of the like critical pieces is that we're going to have farmer forums, and we're going to get together and we're going to gather, and we're going to foster relationship. And then people are going to know each other and know how people are like, and what people are interested in and passionate about, and what they're experts in, or maybe where they need help. And then go back to the online network and be like, okay, this is organized. It's a resource. It's information. It's a place to plug in. I got a question. I got a need. need.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, I can help out, And so it's the duality and the beautiful part, right? Of like using the tools, like you were saying, like the food system, like what are the benefits of the large scale industrial ag? Well, this is something that maybe is that, like, leveraging the best parts of globalization and of these tech tools, but then bringing it home locally. And I think it's because it's that connection piece that matters. It's being able to plug in and feel connected. And I think that kind of needs to happen locally in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so it just perfectly ties into local food for me, because of my food obsession.
Yeah, no, I think there's something to that. And I've always tried to figure out how to like misuse social media in a way that it will work better. That's always been one of my goals is, okay, people use Facebook for this, but how can I use it for that instead? That is better. That's more effective. And kind of like undermines the negative aspects of some of these platforms. Like if Twitter is too reactive and it's these short, nuance-free tweets, then use Twitter but post long-form videos on it. Basically, like use the platform in a way that is unexpected and that takes the best parts of it and sets aside the bad parts of it. I feel like podcasting is a good example of that. It's a technology that's built to have this huge reach. Like it's built on the idea of building a huge audience. Like everything on the internet is how many viewers can you get? How big can you be? But the technology is not necessarily exclusive for this large scale idea. You can have, we have local radio, we have local news, things that are built to be big can be kind of co-opted and used in a more local way. And I think for social media, I don't think social media is inherently a bad thing. I think it's a bad thing when it is this giant global system of people trying to compete individually for the most attention for themselves. But the potential of social media as a way to connect people is actually something really valuable. So seeing that kind of adapted to a local model, and not just specifically around food, but allowing people who have overlapping interests or things that they're passionate about to connect with each other in a way that is not competitive and focused on marketing and advertising and presentation and that kind of stuff.
Add dollars, if you will.
Yeah.
Right? So like that's the bottom line of Facebook, right? And that's why it's become, I think, what it's become. So the Grind and Be, it's a free platform for one. And then two, there's no ability to like put an ad in there or to get you to see something or to not see anything. Like the user has a choice what they click, who they follow. I mean, there's also a learning curve that I'm kind of like, oh no, I'm going to have to teach these like 500 people how to use this, and I'm still learning myself because it is different than Facebook. But I think that like I was saying earlier, it isn't going to be measured. Like the success of it isn't even measured in the amount of people. I can have 5 people on there and I'd be stoked if each of the 5 people showed up in my weekly meeting, like my local food committee that helped me out this year. Mm-hmm. That's the thing, is it's like, it's not a numbers game for me. That doesn't matter. What matters are those values. Like, did we connect with each other in an authentic way? Did we show up? Did we celebrate each other? Did we foster a sense of like what life's about, like feeling good and feeling at peace and feeling like all the things that we know we want to feel, but that we're so conditioned, frankly, to not easily get to.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think that this changing what our goal is, I think is key to figuring this thing out. And we live in a world that is so competitive and the goal seems to be more money, more attention, those type of incentives that do not actually fulfill us most of the time. I mean, we need money to live. Like I don't put it against people that they have needs, in a society, but I think we do have a need for connection and community that's not being met by some of our social systems. And so having that be a part of what you're trying to do is really exciting to me, that it's not just about advertising to people to eat better or telling people like, hey, here's, some local produce you can buy. It's like, how do you get people to connect around something that's important to them? And if the end result of that is that they're more tied in with local food or local organizations or local anything, that creates a stronger sense of community and connection. And it's not just, hey, let's sell as much organic food as we can or whatever. Because there's, there's definitely like, there's a lot of money in trying to get people to like, quote unquote, eat better. There's,
healthy, yeah,
these, big national grocery chains. There's Whole Foods, whatever, which is like, that's Amazon. And there's all kinds of there's all kinds of bad stuff tied up in even the organic food world. It's still like a lot of mass agriculture stuff.
Messy.
So having that kind of local focus that's built around community, I think seems a very good way to make that change in a way that does not necessarily play into these bigger structures that have outsized negative impacts.
Yeah. And I'm really interested in like the root cause. Like, I think that's evident in my personal health journey. Like I was put on antibiotics for like 2 years when I was 12, like my poor microbiome, you know what I mean? Like it took me I'm 40, I'm almost 40, like that. It literally took me 30 years to get back to a place where I'm like, in homeostasis or whatever. So my point is like, that wasn't good enough for me personally, and I knew that that like something was amiss or awry. And so that, I continue to kind of delve deeper. And like I said, it was like a journey, right? It's been like, literally, I'm not exaggerating, a 28-year journey for me to arrive at that place. So I'm trying to grow my own food, which I'm rubbish at, which is another reason why I like farmers. And my buddy, Yana, she does Verdant Connection. She's like a landscape architect. She was like, oh, this is 15 years of work. And it was such a beautiful sigh of relief. Like she's a community member. And because I had that relationship with her, but like having her say that to me, it just took all the pressure off. I've grown like 1 cucumber this year, and I'm like, in 15 years, I'm going to grow a lot of cucumbers, but it's like that journey, right? Like we haven't arrived. If we arrived, we wouldn't be here. We would not be on planet Earth. There's a different planet that holds this type of folk.
Yeah. I think that the patience is a huge part of it. And again, it's all of these things are systemic to the world that we live in. Is we're trained to be impatient. We want everything now. Everything has to be convenient, including our own development and growth and learning. There's this idea, like, I just want to watch like a TED talk and then all of a sudden be fully informed and I'm a better person. And it's like, no, like it's a long time to make major changes in the way that you think and the way that you live and the communities that you live in. So I think being patient with ourselves is really important. And I think that's where a lot of the frustration comes from too, is we're impatient. So if we don't see these like immediate results, like the first time I let I let my like farmer's market produce go bad in my fridge because I didn't know how to cook something or whatever. There's this idea of like, I'm a failure and I'll never do it again. And it's like, no, like that's a learning. And then, like be easy on yourself a little bit.
Well, and I told you this the other day when we met up, but I literally have rotting mustard greens in my crisper right now. Like I want to love them. And so I continue to hang on to them because I'm like, maybe I will find a way to like them, but, and I'm trying to like eat less meat for, my own reasons or whatever. And like the only thing to me that would make these mustard greens palatable is like a ton of bacon, so I've gotten them every week in my CSA box and I'm like, darn it, here we go again. The only thing I can say that I have like a worm composter. So I'm like, okay, I guess the worms are getting some like nutrient dense greens, but yeah, I just wanted to point out that like root cause issue because that's where I've arrived. And I mean, I'm always learning. I don't really feel like I've arrived either, right? But I do feel like I've arrived at this place that the root cause is that disconnection and is the lack of community. And so yeah, that's what gets me out of bed, and it keeps me up at night too. Like because I have no idea what I'm doing. Like I haven't been. I mean, are there surely there are like some sort of degree I could get that's like community something or other, but I didn't get that degree. And so I'm just like trying to show up and like be myself, I do have like the personality of, I always thought I was a people pleaser, and that's probably what has been said about me, and that's not something I'm proud of. But then now the positivity part of my mind is like, actually, I think I'm just really community minded. Like I'm just not as attached to what I need as I am to attach to what's better for all of us. Like I can compromise, and not everybody's like that, right? And so that's why I'm doing this community work, is because I'm very naturally inclined to try to figure out what the sum is going to be better than the part. And continually asking this question, what can we achieve together that we couldn't achieve individually or separate from each other? And that to me is not a question that everybody wants to ask, right? Because they have their own projects or their own things and they're feeling super positive and enriched from those experiences. But that question alone within the local food scene, because of my own personal, passions with it, that's the thing that excites me, is what could I not achieve without you? You know what I mean? Like what can we achieve together that we don't even know we can achieve because we're not in relation or whatever, that's the kind of thing that I find really exciting about this work. So,
yeah. I think that you mentioned you don't have to have a certain degree or a certain education or a certain experience
yeah.
to do a thing. And that's one of the biggest lessons of this podcast is I am an extreme amateur. I have no idea what I'm doing. I had never hosted a podcast before. I'm also like a people person. My jobs have always been with the public. I was a tour guide. I host trivia. Like I do these,
Cool.
like I like a microphone, I guess, but I've never done a podcast. And there's this sense of you have to do something right. If you don't do it right, like there's this fear of failure.
Totally. I have that.
It's silly. It's really, really silly to hold yourself back from doing a thing because you're worried that you don't have enough of the knowledge or enough of the training or enough of the expertise. I have become a huge advocate for just doing things badly, like that. As
Me too.
just
Me too.
do it wrong. I don't care. Like if the thing that's stopping someone from participating in the local food economy, from shopping locally, from volunteering at a farm, any of these things around food, or just other generally being connected with their community. It doesn't have to be around food, but if there's something that's stopping someone from starting a project or creating some kind of group or committee or whatever to get something done, is that they don't think they're the right person to do it, or they don't think they have enough experience. All I can tell people is just go do something. Like you don't need to be afraid of failure. Just do it bad. And if it doesn't work out, then you learned something along the way too. Like
totally. That's okay.
Yeah. And I think that that's one of the challenges that we run into. And again, you talked about this sense of like perfectionism that is very tied up with patriarchy and capitalism, all of these things that holds people back.
Yeah.
And I think letting go of that perfectionism and saying, oh, well, I don't know everything, but I know enough to do a thing. I can't do everything, but I know a little bit and I can do a little thing, and just going and doing that thing. And sometimes you find that that's exactly where you need it to be.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And my friend Melissa Gilbert, she's one of the people behind Be Friendly Reno. She said something to me last year that's really helped me. She said, because I get really nervous about this local food week, like I get scared and I'm like, why am I doing this? But last year she said, it's an offering, Jolene, And so that was such a cool mental paradigm shift for me, because the reason I was scared is because I wanted it to be successful. Of course you do. When you do something and you put work behind it, you want people to show up.
Oh yeah.
But it was absolutely just completely tied to this like fear of failure and feeling like I was going to be like the dorky kid on the playground or whatever that, wherever that comes from, I don't know. And it's kind of egocentric, right? Like, oh, if people show up, then I'm good enough and that I'm successful.
Totally.
And that right. And that it's completely natural. I think it's unfortunately probably normal because we've been conditioned to feel like that. I don't know. I think there's hope in the future that we won't have to be, so connected to those worrisome thoughts. But when she made it like that, I'm like, it's not about me. This is something I'm passionate about. I'm cool to do the work. I like doing the little graphics. I like working with people and figuring out how to like help promote them in a cute, punny way. And it's an offering to the community. And whoever shows up is exactly the people that need, or the person who shows up, and just to kind of like fall back on that was such a nice, like gentle way of doing it. And this year I got to say, like, I've really passed through some mental blocks. Like I'm still a little nervous. To be honest, another thing that helped me is listening to your podcast with Oliver, because he was talking about the lifespan of our town, because they're one of my heroes and mentors and models. And I'm like, dude, it's been going for like 25 years and I'm in my third year. Like I got time. I got time to do this well. You know what I mean?
Totally.
It all ties back into that. What we're doing right now is just creating that relationship of vulnerability and of acceptance and understanding and knowing that like we're showing up and we're doing the best that we can do, and we're probably helping people.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, that's what my hope is that these little things, little conversations, small bits of community connections that you might not have had otherwise, they make a little difference along the way, and more people are included, more people are invited to the conversation. It just creates more opportunity, because I think that's really the key is people are going to find a way to engage or to participate that's comfortable for them, that works for them. So if all we can do is create a little bit more space, then that's something that's valuable to someone along the way. So that's all I'm trying to do. And I'm glad that that's what you're trying to do around food too, because I do think that's one of the areas that people do need to feel a little bit more welcome and capable of participating. I think we need to have that sense of agency around our food that doesn't always really exist. So by creating that space, I think you are giving people more opportunity to plug in a way that works for them that they wouldn't have had otherwise. I think that's important.
Yeah, totally. And I think you hit it perfectly upon the word invitation. Because that's all it can be, right? Is like you are welcome. Like, come on in. Like I said, the water's fine. And like food is so foundational that it's like there's got to be something in there that gets you through the day. Like, what is that? You know what I mean? And go towards that. Go towards joy. Go towards that direction. I mentioned this to you, but it really has resonated with me. So I'd like to share it because it's a compliment to you. But someone said, "Why is Portland so great?" Because I think that my husband's always wanted to live there. I think it's amazing. Lots of good stuff up there, and Reno does have like a little bit of a different kind of brand, if you will, I think, than Portland. I mean, we're smaller and there's lots of other reasons, but, and the person answered back, well, because people like Portland. And I think that resonated with me so much because I always felt like an outlier that I loved Reno so much. I mean, for one, I've been telling people this too. I'm kind of scared of trees. So like, I love Reno because I love the desert. I just love the topography. Like every morning I wake up and I see those purple mountains, I'm at home, and it's that sense of place. It's that connection again to place. Like, this is the place that made me, like what's not to love? Like, I mean, obviously we got our problems, we got our things, you know what I mean? But there's so much, I don't know, just the reality. The reality is that it's my home, And so I think the work that you're doing is helping foster an appreciation of Reno. You're focusing on all the differences and all the people and all the stories and all the good work and things like that. I think you're doing a lot of work in regards to like just helping increase, the Reno love. So thank you.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I think that it's interesting because growing up here, I think like many people, I didn't like my hometown very much. And Reno also was a very different city. When I was younger and I was like, oh, Reno's so boring, there's nothing to do. That was probably kind of true at the time. I mean, as a kid, there's always not that much to do, but Reno has changed so much and actually is a really, really desirable place to live. It's really cool. And there's a ton of stuff going on. And I think that loving the place that you live is so rewarding and it feels good. And when I hear people talk badly about Reno while they're living here in Reno, I'm like, what are you doing? Like, why do you like live somewhere that you love or love the place that you live? There's so much great stuff in Reno. And I think it's really been fun for me to have those conversations and to just like openly love my city. And that's how it's been the last few years since I moved back here a few years ago. I basically jumped right into Reno is awesome. There's tons of great stuff to do. My jobs have helped with that because I've been, as a tour guide, like, paid to tell people how great Reno is. And, but I've internalized that too. And I'm like, oh, I actually believe it too. Like the more you talk about how much you love your city, the more you actually end up loving your city. And the more you have conversations with people who are doing cool things, the more you internalize that idea that there's a lot of great stuff happening in our town. So I think that that is part of the goal of this podcast is just to like openly, unashamedly love this city. It's not perfect, but it's really, really cool. There's a ton of amazing people here. And I think having pride in your hometown is valuable for you as an individual to love the place that you are, I think is really important. And I also think it's good for, we've been talking about community this entire episode. I think that communities really thrive when they have a shared sense of love for the place that they are and the people that are there. So that is part of my hope for this podcast is just, it's kind of a love letter to Reno. This is a great place. And I want to talk about that. I want that to be the narrative of Reno is that Reno is a cool place and the people here love living here. That's important. So I'm glad I'm doing it. I'm glad that's what comes across. What else did we miss? Anything else that you want people to know about Reno Food Week or eating local or anything around community? We've talked about so many, a wide range of things, but what did we miss? Anything that you want to make sure people hear?
No, I think you did a great job asking me that question about like, how can people plug in? And I just would want people to know that there's lots of different opportunities and ways to do so. You can stay at home and watch a pollinator workshop. You can pledge to, financially invest some of your money locally, and that takes 30 seconds. And then the intention and time in doing so, that's important to me to hopefully be able to engage a wide audience of people who, and they find like ways to easily plug in and celebrate, and connect and be like, hey, I was part of that. That was cool, So thank you for asking that question. I feel like I answered that. The only thing that's a little bit of a downer note is that Nevada is the third most food insecure state in the nation. And I just put that in my notes like late last night because I was thinking about it because we do have problems. I mean, we have problems with socioeconomic issues. We have problems with food being just near people, right? Like tons of food deserts. And the word is actually changing from food deserts to food apartheids, because it's not like a lack of water, right? It's a structural system that prevents the food to be easily accessible. Dollar stores don't have fresh veg,
right.
and so people are literally like insurmountable miles away from fresh food. And how are you going to be, how can you be healthy if it's like super hard to get those nutrient dense foods? So, and that's a rural component to it, right? So I guess the point is that there's a lot of work to be done in Nevada, and that's the other kind of part of growing MV that I'd really like to encapsulate and focus on is it's the education piece. So teaching people how to grow and connecting the farmers who are growing, the connection piece, obviously the community, and just creating like that goal that we can accomplish a more resilient local food system together. And then third, really focusing on like sharing food and figuring out ways that we're going to do so. I'm working with a group of folks called Fresh Food Connect, and it's an app, and basically it enables people who have excess bounty in their backyards to be able to drop it off to food pantries and such. So that's another huge part that I see the community being able to offer, because it's like, how many thousands of backyard gardeners are there in Reno, and how many pounds of food could potentially be going to people if we were to create those super easy systems for folks to drop it off. I'm working with a free little pantry. She's got 4 locations around town, and we're going to do like a pilot program for growing MV in order for people to feel like that's yet another way to engage in their local food system, is to help address that food insecurity, to help do your part for the community. You know what I mean? Like if you have all this bounty in your backyard, right? Like, isn't that such a beautiful thing to be able to offer and share that with the community? So things like that help us find ways to work on these really big and very, very important issues. Because seriously, I don't think there's anything that breaks my heart more than thinking about a kid who's hungry, sorry, but so that's another part of it. So,
yeah, I think that I wish we had more time, because I think that there's an entire episode worth of conversation around things like food justice and making sure that people are able to be fed. It's very easy to have these conversations, again, as like middle-class white people trying to eat organic food, that ignores some of the real harm of our food systems. It's, we talk about, people aren't eating that healthy, and we could all be eating a little bit better, but there are people who are actually hungry because of the way that our food systems work. And I think that's it's a much bigger and a much more intense conversation, but I think that one that does need to be had.
Well, and I have friends and people right within that, like Megan O'Farrell does a lot of work with food insecurity, so she'd be a good person to have on. There are better people than me. I think I'm the best person to talk, or not the best, but one of the best people to talk about building community within local food. But I think there are other people that I know that can really speak to it, who have done the work and are showing up every day and helping people and figuring out what the inadequacies and problems are, and also what has been done. There's a lot of work that was done, I feel like, with some of the CARES funding that really helped bolster our local food system, because Reno Food Systems got a grant through the CARES funding that enabled us to buy produce from local farmers after the farmers market were over. That was just food that would be going literally to waste or that would be composted. And so we were able to pick it up immediately and deliver it straight to food pantries, and they were able to process it. And it wasn't a small figure. It was like $250,000, like Reno Food Systems. That wasn't all to Reno Food Systems. It was a group of people that had this offering, but it was a sizable chunk, And then unfortunately what happens though is like then that funding runs out. And then it's, you know what I mean? But we did learn some things, and we were able to write a few different grants, and we were able to model some programs and stuff. So it wasn't all for naught, but it was kind of like a little bit one-off, which I think is just a byproduct of COVID and getting those injections of funds. But yeah, it's a huge issue. And I think that there's definitely room to talk about it in a Reno specific way.
Yeah.
And I do think there's leadership, and I do think there's people involved in the community who are doing a lot of work.
Yeah, that's good to hear. Well, I'll just have to do an episode in the near future that's about more of those specific issues. And I think the sustainability is a big part of it. And we talk about sustainability from like the ecological perspective of being able to, sustain this planet as a place to live. But there's also the sustainability of projects like this, as far as funding, and things need to be able to have either ongoing funding through whatever government mechanism there is, or they need to be self-financed and sustainable financially. So there's a whole bunch of factors that go into creating local food systems that aren't just a quick fix or, based on an injection of cash, but how do they operate year after year, season after season, and become part of the system rather than just a temporary quick fix, but an actual restructuring of the way that things work.
No, I think you're onto exactly that. And I mean, I'm looking into that with Growing in V. I have a little bit of grant funds, a little bit of volunteer time. I'm looking at charging for courses with people potentially, and different types of revenue streams that feel just, but yeah, it's definitely it's a topical and very important question to be able to answer, is like, and frankly, actually, I'm really glad that you brought that up, because I think that there's not enough local food information on people's radar. Like they know that they need to support like kids, or like, what I mean? Like various kind of like hot topics or things that are like very prevalent that need to be helped. But local food, it sounds like, oh, well, people, people make money doing that, or you sell your vegetables and you make money, there's so much financial support that our local food system could benefit from, whether it's like people, larger foundations that could offer that. We have tapped in a little bit to like national and state level grants and things like that. But and not to sound like desperate, but it is a call to action. It is like, hey, there are a lot of people who are doing a lot of work on a shoestring budget that could absolutely benefit from more donation. Even Desert Farming Initiative, which is part of the university, is currently fundraising. Urban Roots, that's what the executive director Faith does with a lot of her time, is just making sure that there's funds to be able to provide garden education to youth. So yeah, if this information is getting to the ears of people who have connections to pockets and connections to the ability to people, please hear me say that local food absolutely needs those types of sponsorships and those types of financial investment. And it's such a good cause, and there's so many good things about it that your money will go very well spent. And it'll have beautiful knock-on effects in terms of people's health, our environment. I'd love Reno to become like a local food mecca, like I'd love for us to be like local food leaders like New England is. New England Food Systems is like such a rad entity. And that's where I did the 21 Food Justice Racial Equity Challenge that literally changed my life, and where I learned a lot of this framework stuff about white dominant culture and patriarchy. I did it it was under a year ago, and it literally changed my life for the better. And it's kind of what I've been trying to do to show up for food justice and racial equity issues that we all are becoming more aware of. So yeah. So thank you for bringing that up. I appreciate the ability to kind of create that plea or say that plea.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, I'm glad that there are organizations in Reno who are doing the work and building the structures and kind of putting things together, and they just need the support and the resources in the community. And I'm generally an optimist about Reno's future in a bunch of different ways. We're growing. A lot of people are moving here. I think that we are a city that has adapted and reinvented ourselves over and over and over again, and we have the potential to continue to do that. I think that Reno is a very kind of like malleable city in terms of the culture here, the way that we work economically, the way that our community builds and restructures itself over years and generations. I am a firm believer that Reno can be whatever we want it to be. So it's encouraging that there are these organizations doing the work, and really I'm optimistic that if we put the people in the right places and we create the communication and kind of the networks of people that are trying to make a difference in one way or another, that those things can come into fruition in Reno. I'm a firm believer in that. It's just a matter of, putting the people together and creating the opportunities for it. So I'm really glad that those organizations are doing it. I'm glad that you're doing that around food, because we definitely need leaders in each of these different areas. So having someone like you actually doing a lot of the on the ground work and making these connections and building this community and creating the platforms and the potential for people to connect, I think is, you talked about the root causes, like you're planting new roots, I think, for the community, which I think is an important, that's the key.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. I take that compliment, and I'm honored and inspired and very happy that I've kind of found this, because for the first time in my life, I'm like, oh, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. So that's another piece too about being 40 and not like having really set in my career. I always thought I wanted to be the GM of a local food co-op. And then I did that. And then I was like, oh no, I don't know if this is actually it, and then I had like a breakdown, and then I became a mom, and then all hell broke loose. Right. So yeah, I feel happy about the fact that hopefully maybe I've arrived at something that I'm naturally gifted at, and that can keep me ticking and helping other people.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's a whole conversation to be had about purpose and having that be what guides us in what we do. We could talk for hours and hours and hours. Oh my gosh. This is going to be my first 6 hour long podcast episode.
That's my fault.
No, we'll do. You should come back on the show another time. I think that there's so much to talk about, and I really, really appreciate you taking the time to come on the show and talk about food stuff and community. And this episode originally, my intention was, we'll do an episode about Reno Food Week, but it has been so much more expansive than that and more important than that. And I'm really grateful that we were able to kind of expand the scope of this conversation beyond just, hey, come to Food Week, because I think there is a lot more to it. But come to Food Week, go to your local farmers market. I know that the Riverside Farmers Market has the food fair.
Yeah, it's going to be Thursday, August 19th. So I think, I'm not sure when this is going to air, but it's in a couple weeks time from now. And that's it's cool because it's their inaugural event. And it was really beautiful because she's like, hey, I know you're doing Local Food Week, Casey, the market manager. And she's like, I want to do this food fair with loads of like local food competitions, eating competitions, pie baking competitions, workshops. And I want to do it during Local Food Week. And I was like, this is brilliant. This is exactly what I want. I want people within the local food community coming to me every year. When can I do Tomato Tuesday? When is Local Food Week happening again? And, so it was a perfect marriage, if you will. So yeah, that's on Thursday. We're giving away locally grown food, like at every single market within Reno. And I wanted to say it's not just Reno Local Food Week, because we got an event in Fallon. We're at the farmers market in Carson City and in Sparks. We're going to give away herbs at Reno Food Systems on their urban farm stand. I mean, come on, it's been there the whole time. Urban. I mean, so good. It's actually one of my favorite things that's happened this year with Local Food Week. I got Tomato Tuesday, so we're giving away a pound of free tomatoes to the first 100 people. The Bonsai Blue Garden Market is a new market. It was here last year, and it's just early days for them. And we are giving away peppers. So you pick your favorite pepper. They've got mild ones, shishito and hatch peppers, all the way down to the Thai dragon and the ghost pepper. So folks can come and pick their favorite pepper. At the Carson Farmers Market, we're giving away flowers, and we're going to be doing a pollinator workshop online. And I mean, so many, I think there's more than a dozen events, so I'm not going to go through them one by one, but there are some cool opportunities to get some fresh, free, locally grown goodness.
And what's the best place for people to get the overview and kind of see what all these events are? Is it the Growing Envy site? So it's growingenvy.com?
Yeah, that's all it is. Yeah, it's growingenvy.com. And just a caveat, it is a membership site, and that's not to scare you. Like I don't want your data, The reason why they do that is because it is a community. And so if you go to growingenvy.com/events, that'll take you exactly to the list of events that we have on for the week. And each one has its own description. You can RSVP to the ones that need RSVPs, the farmers market. You just got to show up. But yeah, that's where you get all the information. And then once you sign up, then you are part of the community if you want to be. And then the real work is going to be this next year, getting together, figuring out, I'm going to do a big visioning session about the priorities and distilling the mission further so that I really can focus my energy on providing what's most needed in the community. And there'll be loads of offerings throughout the year. We're going to do the year in garlic course again. So it's a cool thing where it's like, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We don't have to do a bunch more work. We have this amazing asset. Like, how can we repurpose this and get more people, different people to do it this year? So we'll be giving away garlic for those who want to enroll in the course at the Riverside Farmers Market, their local food fair. So yeah, lots of offerings, lots of things to talk about, and hopefully lots of different ways to plug in. And it's all on Growing Envy. Excellent.
Perfect. I'll put a link to that in the show notes and everything. And thank you again so much for coming on the show. It was super awesome to talk to you about food stuff. I'll have to have you on the show again. We have a million more things to talk about.
Well, I have I know people too, right? I got my people. So if there's anything food related or farming or any of that type of stuff, don't hesitate to reach out.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Bye, Connor. It was so fun talking to you.
Listeners, thank you again for tuning into this week's episode of Renoites, and special thank you to my guest, Jolene Cook, for putting on Reno Food Week and doing so much work in our community around food and building community and getting people together. Really important work, and I really appreciate it. Go to growingenvy.com to see all the happenings with Reno Food Week and just to connect with your community. As always, if you have any feedback about this episode or any others, I would love to hear it. Shoot me an email. My email address is Conor, CONOR, @Renoites.com. And if you have a moment, I would love for you to leave a positive review on Apple Podcasts. That helps people find the show. Only takes a moment. If you leave those 5-star reviews when people find the show, they'll see how good it is, and they're more likely to listen. So help me out, do that. Also, spread the word about the show. It's still new. I'm always trying to let people know that Renoites exists. There's a lot of people in town who listen to podcasts, and they don't even know about this show yet. So feel free to let your friends and family know, share posts, spread the word, and help us reach as many people as possible. I appreciate it. That's all I got for you this week. See you next time.